Hi, I thought I would take you on a bit of a journey and see how you do. The journey I'm going to take you into is the iris. I'd like to take you more deeply into the iris constitution than perhaps you've been before. And I know that you study irises, see them all the time. I'm going to share with you what my own personal process is about how to know and feel an iris. And then I'm going to explain the importance of learning to study all of them in a very personal way. By a personal way, I mean I'm suggesting a pattern that I call a dot and a circle. Now, just so you know, the iris is a dot and a circle. So for me, this is a symbol within a symbol, and there are three basic gates inside this constitution, right at the pupil, right at the ring of expression, and then all the way out to the perimeter. We'll come back to them because what I really want you to do is to have an opportunity to do a dot inside of an iris. Now, I'm asking you to use your imagination, use your feeling, use your alertness, and I want to take you through a sequences of irises, some sequences about how this feels. And by that, I mean it takes a moment to be aware, alert, and feel. The alert is a dot, the feel is a circle. So when the dot moves inside of something and it maintains its awareness, it becomes more like a line. In that experience of becoming a line, it also envelops and becomes a circle. So the ability to be able to look at an iris is for you to have the opportunity to expand something inside yourself. Now, very few people have this iris constitution you see behind me. It's quite rare, but every iris constitution is rare, and there is only one of them. So you can see by being in front of this what it would feel like to be involved in this person's space or energy feeling. If you get the feeling for what a flower pattern is, you can take yourself inside and feel that. Now, this is an exercise that will increase your own capacity to feel. If you take your awareness, your alertness, you move inside your imagination to experience what it would feel like to embody or touch or move inside of this iris pattern. What would this iris pattern feel like if it were in motion? What would this iris pattern feel like if it were in touch with this magnitude or diameter? This is, in my opinion, a very broad diameter type constitution, but it's in touch with things at a very far distant nature. So it is a spatial perception type. If I bring in another one, I'll bring in an opposite. Now you have a very kinesthetic type iris. Can you apply the same basic experience with it? Meaning that it is, if you take your dot, which is your awareness, deeper inside of this, and you practice your circle, which is your imagination and flower. Flower is a spatial perception experience. If you practice your kinesthetic, which is what this iris really is good at, then you're practicing your sense of texture and touch and form and mass, gravity, and posture. So if you want to enter this structure, this is a kinesthetic postural type. What that means is this is an iris constitution that likes to have a sense of touch. This sense of touch has many ranges to it. It can be very left brain, which is a sense of touch with the past, or very right brain, which is a sense of touch with the future. But this is a sense of congruency, of structure, of form. This is also the principle of the gravity. So if you embody this one, by the way, this is very much a stream and maybe even a stream flower, because the density of the vascular system is quite thin. Even though they're all straight, this is a stream connecting type. Now I'm going to go back to the other one for a moment, and this is its opposite. So this expansive emotional type is a driver or a movement-oriented type. So this goes into the principles of expansion. And there are 3 forms of expansion on the father side, 3 forms of expansion on the mother side. So you can learn how to feel this expansive type when you're practicing this one. Remember, this is designed to be a feeling experience of the Constitution. Now, this has many different reasons why it's important to you personally, because this is a form of medicine. This is also a form of medicine. What I mean by that is this is another expansive, emotional flower type person, and this is a qualitative experience which also occupies the perimeters of the sympathetic nervous system. To be able to occupy more of yourself, gradually you learn how to occupy more of your sympathetic flower nervous system. If I give you a slightly different one, or a very different one, I give you the opposite. Obviously, constitutionally, you can see how this is an opposite to the last one. Now, this one has the same 3 gates, the pupil, the ring of expression, the perimeter, but inside this diameter, it's primarily using a dot-like presence. This dot-like presence is a electro or a binding focus of alertness, awareness, and this is the dot. The last one that we were talking about was the circle. This is a round loop spatial type. So these 2 are magnetic, and this one is electrical, electromagnetic. Now, if you want to climb inside the pupil and embody this a bit, this will be extremely therapeutic for you personally to learn to practice the dot and the circle. The jewel and the flower, they are composed of opposites. And these opposites are always turning around, and they are always trying to do this. The flower, sympathetic emotional expression. The jewel, parasympathetic cooling expression, and they're always circulating with each other, looking for the equilibrium somewhere in the middle. I'm suggesting that you practice both the masculine side of the sympathetic, which is oftentimes more regulated by the father's side of the family, and this is the parasympathetic jewel side of the family, and these 2 are always engaged in this endless expansiveness. So if we come back to these 4 structures, these are the 4 types that you and I need to have a sincere desire to want to practice. Now, if you're an analytical dot jewel type, you'll automatically attract emotional feeling flower types. If you're a shaker type, you'll automatically attract the stream consistent grounded type. There are an infinite variety of combinations of these. I work with primarily 12 constitutional types. I like different combinations. You can do them right here if you want. Jewel and flower, stream and flower, stream and shaker, stream and jewel, shaker and flower, jewel and stream. You have combinations of these. But these combinations, so I could give you a totally different view of it, it would actually, in its higher form, look like this. This is kind of your pupil, and these gates move outward. Now, each one of these, you can call them meridians, you can call them glands, you can call them organs, you can call them whatever you like. But for me, they're also soul-based lessons about what it is that we're actually learning by being here in this particular iris constitution. So if I bring up an iris constitution and I have one of these, yes, here is the primary constitution, which is the primary expression or personality or primary attributes or characteristics or skill sets of that person. So what I typically like to do is I like to acknowledge these individual positions and ring the bell that they exist. Now, if I'm having a consultation with someone and I look at a particular position, it's going to be in what I call a vector. It's going to be either over to the side, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to be somewhere else. I'm always looking for what vector this position is in. By that, I mean that if you take the heart upward, the midline of the iris is everything from the heart up, and everything from the midline of the iris down is from the heart down. So I like to see where is this versus this, and this will tell you which ring it's on of the 3 rings that I referred to about how to change it. How can you occupy this constitution? So when you see a position, I urge you to identify it, even if you don't know what it is. What I mean by that is, you might show a person their own picture. Look at this beautiful curved shape inside of you, and it's right next to a dot. Now, if you look at this, this happens to be right on the horizon line, so it's right at the heart and right at the throat. So what could be the underlying lessons or skill sets that happen to be occupying this position? I'm saying something that I consider to be important. Identify these locations even if you don't know what it is. You might see generalized patterns that I would gladly share with you, the harmony ring throughout, this lymphatic rosary function, and the blue ring around the outside. There's all kinds of interpretations that are available. But to help you grasp it, it comes down to learning the vectors. For me, the vectors are somewhat like this. Now, this is a jewel. 95 to 97% of all jewels go right brain. The same number of flowers go left brain. Now, left brain, right brain are old terms from the 80s and the 70s. I still use them because they're part of my understanding. But this has to do with flowers have a tendency to gravitate toward the masculine side of the family. Jewels have a tendency to gravitate toward the feminine side of the family. And for me, the jewels and the flowers, each one of these lines, they have different lessons, skills, and abilities at different magnitudes of increase. So jewel, 6 primary lessons. Flower, 6 primary lessons. For example, I'll just give you a few. For the jewel, you give them the opposite. Open, which a flower does oftentimes very well. Feel, not so easy for a jewel, but very easy for a flower. Allow, yeah. Receive, no, not so well. So all of the individual lessons that the jewel has is composed within the natural character of the flower. So if I'm a jewel, and I understand how, or beginning to understand how these fit together, I want to intentionally practice each one of these primary skill sets of the flower. Now, there is a skill set at the bottom of the body. There's a skill set in the belly. There's a skill set in the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the head. These are 6 lessons of the jewel, 6 lessons of the flower, and they're all inside me. That's why I like this kind of picture, because it actually turns out to be this. Each one of if you look closely, each one of these has an individual line. These are skill sets we all have. These are all of the areas of the iris, primarily circulating with some degree of willingness to learn each one of these varying kinds of lessons. So if we come back to this lesson, this is a test. This is only a test. What does this one feel like? A jewel or a flower? Well, that's pretty easy. You see this flowing, easy pattern in nature, that this beauty in nature is teaching us this qualitative experience of spatial-oriented, allowing, feeling, beauty, receptivity. I've been practicing this one for a long time, and I'm a long ways from being there, but I'm a little better at this one. I like this one because now this one has a little organization to it. It's not just all over the place. You see these individual dots in here that have these points and perfect curves, and as a Fibonacci spiral, there are 2 of them back there. And this is just like the iris. It has 3 rings. It has a 1 and a 2 and a 3 on the petals. Jewel. It's a nice thing to see it in nature, because nature does it everywhere. This is deep space. This is what I see an iris as. I want to practice the jewel. The jewel is an aware desire to want to know the truth about this. Now, the problem is, if the jewel breaks into pieces, and it goes into excessive analytical mentalness, and all the pieces get fractured, and they spend all their time either wanting to read or being into spatial realities of some other world. They're out of their body. They can't receive. A challenging thing to do. So my suggestion is, remember, there are 6 flower lessons, 6 jewel lessons. If you're a flower, you need to incorporate the focused ability of a jewel to watch, be alert, and watch. Now, part of the alertness of a jewel that the flower learns is a personal habitation of one's own responsibility, because the flower has a tendency to want to go away and out. So what's a flower learning that a jewel has? Focus, alert, clear determination to want to be myself. Most jewels, they just want to discover and go out or be, I just want to go to the cosmos, be a fairy, go to God. Most jewels are trying to do that with all fragments of their own mind, and they marry a flower. And the 2 start to bring their opposites together, and these are all the gates, or the chakra system if you want, glands, organs, and body systems, where these 2 are relating to each other. So how can the flower stay alert inside the bone crystals of the spine? How can a flower be focused on individual blood cells inside the body to be able to study and touch and feel the experience of a gland or an organ. So I'm always trying to bring the flower back inside the body in a particular way. I'm always trying to bring the jewel back inside the body in a particular feeling flower way. This is how I work with the iris. To me, the iris is a sacred cathedral. So here, it's an odd way to think of an iris, is to feel it from inside out. The sincere desire to want to feel my flowerness, or a sincere desire to feel my shaker, my stream, my jewel, and to feel all of them actually supporting each other. This is a postural, kinesthetic, touch-oriented experience of imagining being inside the pupil and occupying those individual qualities that are essential. Sometimes it even looks a little bit like this. This is a jewel point with flower feeling. This also, by the way, happens to be the 4 seasons of the year. This happens to be the autumn. Here comes the winter coming into spring. There's the spring going into summer and coming back. This is a cycle of every iris. Everybody has these circulating perimeters happening inside of them. Now, the other patterns relative to the irises, vectors. These are the vectors I look at. I'm looking at where the individual attention is. Is it lateral? Is it medial? Is it in the father's eye, the right eye of the person? Is it in the mother's eye, the left eye of the person? So these are patterns of movement of yin and yang happening throughout the day, throughout the seasons. The opportunity for you is to come deep inside and feel your own. I don't know of anything for myself that is more important than learning how to feel. Yes, there is an equal experience of learning how to be able to be alert, to focus, to determine, to discover, to pierce into, is the ability to ascend. That's where the dot, when it comes together, creates a line. When the dot is a flower, it expands into a circle. So when you take the dot and the circle in the same place, you open gates that you've not opened before. The only way I can share that with you is just to say, give it a try. Now, my suggestion is do it utilizing your family tree. So if you notice that you're a jewel, pause for a moment and consider the amount of pain and suffering on your father's side of the family. What's the worst fear of a jewel? Being controlled, being criticized, loss of recognition, loss of freedom. Jewels can feel intellectually, mentally suffocated. So they seek some type of liberation. And as I mentioned before, 95 to 97% of the time, the jewels will use pain on their father's side of the family to facilitate a movement toward learning how to feel. Here's the basic truth that I can give you. You have to learn both of these. The ever-increasing responsible alertness to your own existence at increasingly higher levels. These increasingly higher levels They have to do with the gates inside the body. So you're learning how to facilitate the movement between the pituitary and the pineal. That's a jewel in a flower. You're learning to facilitate the movement between the thyroid and the parathyroid, and the spleen and the thymus function. In the solar plexus, you're learning to facilitate liver and pancreas. And on down into the body, you're doing the pelvic cavity, you're doing the adrenal sides, the two different sides. You're using feeling and passion, you're using the kidney and the adrenal function. And then you're using gonadal, ovary functions, reproductive processes, and you're using all of these inside of you. That's why I never tire of looking at any iris structure. This is a lesson. What I mean by that is, if I can deeply appreciate this lesson, and then I have another consultation that looks like this one, and I can deeply appreciate the textural beauty, then every person that's coming to me actually is a gift and a lesson, a sister and a brother. This is another one. So all of these are lessons and gifts for me to feel. Here's somebody showing me how to do something that they do very well. If I'm willing to open, allow, receive while being learned, if I am willing to transform, change, embody, touch this one, well, then that's where it becomes a little bit more like this. And then gradually it comes into focus where it's designed to be your skill set. Ultimately, our goal is to open all of these different vectors with awareness and feeling and movement and touch and embodiment. And yes, support that with the biochemical world. And then you'll find out that all of these are people. These are people, ancestors in your family tree. These are friends, these are relatives, these are people that you love. All of these are brought to you by people. That's what the iris really means to me. So I hope this has been of some use to you. And if you're in doubt, well, you can decide whether you like this one or, okay, give you a good look at it, or this one the most. I mean, are you a jewel or are you a flower? I mean, you can decide which one. Well, practice being both. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for being out there serving so many. See you soon.